To us, and we're live.
Okay. Alrighty, we're just gonna start the podcast. Hey, bro, what's up? I'm Vin,
And I'm Jeff.
and welcome to our podcast. Today, today is our first week in the emotions chapter, and our first chapter is going to be about anger. We have our first guest, Phil. Phil is my brother-in-law, and just a good friend, and with gaming and just being there for each other throughout the years. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself? Give a brief description.
Yeah, my name's Phil. I met Vin's sister in college and we dated for 7 years. I got to know Vin during that time, and he got to know my angry side very well during that time when we used to do gaming together.
Yep.
I thought it was funny that, well, I actually do think it's telling that I was like the first person that came up when Finn had an episode about anger because I've never thought of myself as an angry person, but it's something I'm coming to terms with more and more. So yeah, excited to be here. I live in Austin, Texas, so pretty close to Vin these days, and yeah,
Alrighty. And going into anger, we have a quote of the week. Phil?
yes. Okay, the quote of the week is holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. And that is attributed to Buddha.
Ah, thank Buddha. Yep. Um, all right, so let's go into it and let's talk about how commonplace anger is for men. I believe it's instinctual. Since we were born, I think it's like a instinctual emotion that people just have to be angry. What do y'all think?
I mean, that would make sense because, if you think way back to ancient humans, we were hunters, and anger, if used properly, is a pretty good emotion when it comes to having to track down and hunt your prey. So it could be something that is ingrained in us to this day still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's probably just somehow linked to like the idea of pain. Like you get angry at things like humans that got angry at things that caused pain, for example, avoided them or stopped dealt with those threats and were better fit to survive or something like that. I'm sure that anger is advantageous in like a natural environment in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like
How do you?
adrenaline, I guess. Like adrenaline, I feel
Yes.
like it's sometimes fueled by anger.
That's a really good point of
Yeah.
using anger to, well, but more like what Jeff said was like in the hunter times, right? We needed more physical um prowess to hunt to be able to get food and everything. Nowadays, I guess anger is not as useful mostly. There are places where you need anger, but um to survive, but I think nowadays it's more obsolete.
More obsolete, and like there's not as much of a need for it. So now anger nowadays is mainly just viewed as a negative impact.
Mm,
But I think that's interesting to talk about though. Like, is this like if you had a hypothetical society where like that had no one that had anger, like is that something we'd actually want? In a lot of ways, and I don't know how much we're going to talk about this, but like we talk about justified anger or like outrage, right? Like when someone talks about outrage, now we talk about outrage culture, but like I think it used to be that outrage was anger against like evil and or
mm,
something like that. Like
right.
anger was a way of showing how you felt about like someone's actions or behaviors, whether those things were moral or correct.
And I
Right.
mean, in today's society, that actually does kind of make sense in terms of like a positive anger would be like outrage over whatever the situation may be.
Injustices.
And like, yeah, injustices, someone is unfairly jailed or, murdered or something along those lines. Like, having that public outrage towards that situation could be like one of the few instances of positive anger in our society today.
But yeah, I think usually when people get angry, it's they're getting angry like they're taking something personally, and they're not being
Absolutely.
angered on behalf of someone else. Like usually it's some kind of inner thing. But anyway, yeah, I think that it probably has some place in society. I think it's kind of interesting to think about, just like
Right. And
yeah,
I
how
think
effective it is.
correct. And I think the more we progress, the more like technological advances we make, the societal advances, it might, yeah, I think anger would get in the way socially, than not. But we can get into that at the end. So let's go into talking about how it affects daily living, at work, relationships, even gaming. Mainly, that's what Phil brought up earlier. Is I only see him angry during gaming, um, and finances.
I mean, gaming is one of the most common anger points for a lot of at least our generation nowadays.
Hmm.
Like, yes, there are still other things that go on outside in your life with work, family, spouses, things like that, but there ain't nothing worse than, being in the zone and someone that's better than you comes and stops that and you're like, no.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a good answer for this. Like it is so funny because like this whole time and then it's so interesting like the psychology aspect of this where like there's like a ranked queue or an unranked queue, and if you are in the ranked queue you take things so much more seriously, and I feel like are more prone to anger, just like at least I was. And where like the tangible differences is really negligible, you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
it's still a game at the end of the day. Very few of us are playing for a living. I certainly wasn't. Uh, and man, like I would just get so angry. I think, yeah, in general, how anger affected me was like it really was only with family and with like gaming. And I thought it was fine because it was really confined to those spheres and my relationship too. But it's crazy now that I think back on it because like I used to excuse that, like, oh, I'm only angry when I game, so that's fine. I'm
Mm.
not really an angry person, or
Mm.
I'm only angry at my parents and my siblings because, and that's fine because they deserve it. But it's like those, but those are like some of like the closest relationships I had were like with my gaming friends and with my family. So it really I think showed my truer self more
Mm.
than I thought it was like an exception. I think it was more of a rule. Like, and for other people who I had more surface level kind of relationships with, I didn't bother getting angry because nothing they did. Not that I
Got it.
bothered. Like I just had more of a front, I think.
Mm.
Now, when
Yeah,
it
I
comes to family, like, is this you now as an adult being able to look from the outside? You're able to see that, okay, I was actually pretty mad with them, or did you like experience it like while you were living it as well?
Yeah, I I knew I was getting angry, but I thought it was always justified, right? So I didn't consider myself an angry person. Like I felt so outraged at the behavior of people around me. Um, and I saw that it worked. I guess that was the other thing. So I don't even know if I wanted to like characterize the behavior. It was just subconscious. I think that whenever I like hit something or like heighten my voice, like people would just kind of stop, do things to appease me, and I just kept doing that. I think
mm.
a lot of this comes with some kind of retrospect and living on my own. Like while I was living with my parents during COVID 4 years ago, I really was going through like severe bouts of anger. Um, but in
You
the
think
moment. It didn't feel like I was an angry person. I felt like things were justified.
right? So so you say like away from the places that it worked, you didn't really need to use it, right? And so you couldn't tell. You were like, oh, okay, I'm not normally an angry person because in the places that aren't used, I'm fine. But the places that did work, I'm gonna use it to its fullest ability.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, like it wouldn't have worked obviously if I went into a professional workplace and like
Yell at
was hitting
everyone,
things, right? Like, yeah, yeah,
flipping
Probably
the
catch
and some,
fire
table.
but
pretty
but
quick.
for some people, like at least that's my job. I know there are other jobs where people do get away with being like angry and abusive verbally,
Hmm.
um, and it helps with their job. But like that wouldn't have flown with my job.
Hmm.
Does it still affect you like in your daily life today?
Uh yeah. I mean, I don't know about daily life, but it's something that comes up, once a week, once a month. It still comes up in these domains, to be honest. I mean, these are the domains where I still need to deal with it. And so I've got some strategies now for gaming that I think help a little bit, or at least, yeah. I mean, I just mute myself, to be honest. I don't know if it's a
So,
strategy.
so is it,
I'm like, okay. And
does
my
it
friends
actually
will
work
know.
then?
I don't know if that's a solution or just like, well, I'm keeping it to myself.
I mean, it's
Right.
pretty
Um,
similar to me. Like I've had times where I'm just like, all right, I need 5 minutes. I'm just gonna walk away.
yeah.
Whether I
No,
pause it or just leave it running, I'm just like, I need 5 minutes. I'm out.
It
yeah.
reminds me of
Yeah. I know.
keep going, Phil.
No, no, no. You go ahead.
It reminds me of me and Jeff were in training for this one company, and like the trainer wasn't good. The way they managed everything was not good, and there was just Jeff, you're gonna have to remind me, but you like just stood up and got away. Like we had to have Zoom, like we had to have cameras on our faces in the Zoom call, and you just shut it off, and you just left or something. I forgot what happened.
So that was related but also unrelated. So the reason I got mad and turned my camera off was because the other higher ups called me on my cell phone and were blaming me for everything
Yeah.
that was going wrong in that class. And yes, I was a trainer for that company, but that wasn't my class. I was a student in the class, but they're like, "Oh, you're a leader. You need to embody what a leader is, and you should
Right.
not let them be speaking negatively." And I'm like, "But I'm not in a leadership role at the moment. Like, how is this my fault that other people are upset that this is bad?" And they were like,
Mm,
"Well, that's not how it is. Like, you need to be the leader. You need to shut that down." I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm gonna do."
See, in this case, I think this is where anger, like the Phil's question of like, oh, in a utopia society, without anger, is that a good thing? And I think if Jeff just took it, right, and he didn't feel an injustice, then I think people would just walk on top of other people, step on other people if no one's gonna get a backlash from doing an injustice.
Right. Like, there needs to be give and take, and anger is one of those give and take situations. So,
Hmm.
using that situation as the example, like, had I just rolled over and been like, you know what, you're right, I'm at fault, when would it have ended?
Right, exactly. Because they'll just keep
mm.
using you as the scapegoat.
Were they angry in that call? Or like, were you responding to anger, or were they kind of just blaming you?
So, it was more so blame with, like, a hint of disappointment.
Got it.
Like, oh, we expected better of you, and from me, it was just pure confusion. I was like, I don't understand how I'm in the wrong here. And I even asked that at one point. I was like, what did I do or what did I say that is making you react this way to me and shift this blame on me?
Hmm.
And they couldn't even answer that question. Their response was, well, if you have to ask that question, that's a problem there as well. And I'm like, that solves nothing.
Mm.
End of the call, though, I did end up getting demoted.
Wow.
So they
Yeah.
blamed me for the situation, and it was more so that they blamed me for not stopping it, I guess, is my understanding. And they were like, we're stripping you of your trainer position. You are now just a regular employee again. And I was like, yeah, I quit. And they're like, well, don't quit. I'm like, yep, no, I'm gone. I'm gonna go find a new job. Thanks for the last year and a half.
Mm, that's crazy. Do you think? But that wasn't a decision made like you made out of anger. Like you were like, are you happy about that decision to quit?
I think it was a very good decision because it wouldn't have stopped there. And I truly believe they would have found something to fire me
Else,
for
right?
eventually. It may not have been the next day, the
Mm.
next week, the next month, but I think my time there was limited. I don't think I would have been able to stick around much longer.
Mm,
I'm kind of in the bad predicament of I still don't have a job. It's been over a month now, but something will come along.
Yes,
yeah.
sir. Okay, so those are examples of like how anger affects at work and gaming. Let's go into relationships. How do we think anger affects relationships? Like any, friendships, family, romance. Um,
Well, from the friendship perspective, it's going to come to how people can cope with not seeing eye to eye on everything with everyone. So, like, I have multiple friends that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of topics we disagree on,
mhm,
but it's not like we treat each other differently because of those. It's not like I'm sitting here like, you need to see things from my perspective, otherwise, I'm not going to speak to you. And I
right.
think that's a problem we have with a lot of people today is they're in that mindset of it's my way or the highway,
Mm.
which then turns into screaming, anger, beratement.
And burned bridges. Yeah. Friends anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like that anger detracts from most relationships. Like
yeah.
if it can, if it's like a brief, if it's periodic, I think that it detracts from relationships or like recurring, I guess is the better word
Right.
because
Habitual.
I think it builds habits, yeah, like from both the angry person and the person that's trying to diffuse the situation that like are not healthy for direct communication because you know the anger shuts off usually conversation and then the person who is getting angry at or like receiving that anger or like learns to cope. So in my like just personally I feel like my mom is one example where I would get angry at my mom a lot and like just like raise my voice at her and yell at her and it like became that she was like scared of talking to me. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Especially on difficult subjects. And it's not like she stops caring. Like she's my mom. She's gonna keep caring about me and trying to understand me or trying to influence me. But the way she does it now, and I've had to like work on this a lot of trying to be more direct with her now that I've kind of got my anger a little bit better under control. But she'll like text she'll text my sisters to text me, or like she'll just try to like not actually engage with me face to face, and that just causes a lot of like frustration on my part because it feels manipulative sometimes, but it also feels just not efficient, I guess, and not conducive to actually us forming a healthier relationship.
So it's more of
Yeah.
a long term effect of it, kind of that domino effect of, well, he got angry, X, Y, and Z, so if I need to revisit X, why should I do it when I can have someone else do it for me to
Mm-hmm.
avoid that backlash?
Yeah.
Yeah, another part was like you're in the relationship, it's usually anger, it uses the tool of fear rather than like supportive, positive emotions. So yes, it you can get it can get you what you want, But then, like you said, the long-term effects of using fear is not conducive to a good relationship.
But there is
Yeah.
still healthy anger in relationships as well. Like an example I can give, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but my wife and I were faced with a decision we had to make due to a medical condition recently.
Mm,
And we weren't angry with each other, like it's completely out of our control, but we were angry at the situation together,
mm.
and we leaned on each other to get through that.
Nice. Both angry at a well, and I think that goes with like an injustice, right? Like there's something wrong. Y'all both saw it eye to eye, and then, it wasn't at each other. I think that's the
Correct.
main difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like we were angry at a situation, but we handled it very well, and neither of us took it out on the other.
Right. Cool. The last point is finances. But I think that goes into like relationships, right? Usually you'd get angry with finances if like your partner or anything, um, or even yourself, right? You're angry at your financial situation. I can see that.
Yeah, and I think like leaning into that, like when it comes to finances, something I've seen a lot of people struggle with is like unnecessary spending from their partner.
Mm,
So like I've seen a lot of different couples where like one is the saver. They're not going to spend anything they don't have to, so that way like, oh well, if I put away $20 a week for this long, I can get this big thing that I wanted and it's not going to affect me. And then you have the other side of the coin in that same relationship where it's like, I want that. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to buy it.
Hmm.
And I've seen a lot of relationships end because of that, to be completely honest.
right.
Like because you don't want to trust that person like if they can't handle themselves financially.
Yeah. I think to rise to the level of anger, that means that there isn't. I feel that. Like, for example, in my relationship, I feel like, well, it's different with different things, but generally I'm the spender, and Tran has more of a saving. My wife, Tran, has a more of a saving mentality. And, we have like tried to establish boundaries of like, well, ultimately it comes down to like trust of like, do I trust you to be a steward of our finances? Um, and if the answer is yes, well, it's like, okay, yes, trust, but also verify. So if there's like a $200, like let's have a $200 limit. So like if you're making a purchase above $200, we should check with me, check in with each other. So I feel like the kind of communication has helped keep those things from spiraling into anger more. So I don't know. For me, anger and finances hasn't it's never really risen to the level of anger. I feel like it can start with annoyance.
Mm,
If someone is different than you and you start judging them, oh, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have made that decision. I wouldn't have purchased that.
hmm.
And if you don't have a way of releasing that resentment, then it's going to bottle up and maybe eventually become anger.
Right. Right. Especially if it's a recurring, kind of what you were saying. It's like a habitual. It keeps doing it over and over and over again, but it
Mm,
doesn't sound like it never ever gets to that for you personally.
Yeah, it sounds
yeah.
like you were able to get ahead of it and establish that, level of trust of, hey, like, you see something you want, get it, but if it's over this certain amount, we should probably have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good way to approach it.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm not perfect at it. Like there's still times that one of us will purchase things and the other person gets annoyed, but I don't feel like it has staying power. Like it will dissolve because you know we can live with that. I
Right.
think a little bit, but it takes. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes back to trust.
Fair enough.
Cool. So let's look at what do we think about underlying emotions for anger? It could include being hurt. Actually, I saw that in the chat, in the Twitch chat. Cactus Cast had said a good analogy of anger is pain. Pain isn't good, but it's there to let us know something is wrong. I think anger can be seen in the same regard. It's not a good feeling, but it's there for a reason. Um, Give me 1 second. Um, let's see. So here I have the notes here is underlying emotions for anger can include hurt, fear, frustration, sadness, or vulnerability. So the hurt of pain, and you don't know how to express it, so you go out, you lash out in anger. I think are good underlying emotions. Like it's not just being angry. There could be something going on in the background as well.
Yeah, and I feel like we've touched on that throughout like our conversation tonight. Especially like Phil's brought up frustration a number of times, and frustration is one of the probably bigger ones that can lead to anger. On top of fear, I'd like to explore the hurt aspect of it though. So, like, are we talking physical pain, emotional pain, like that can lead to anger? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
I was thinking both, right? Physical, yep, it's drive, got it. Is physical pain, right? You're in a fight or something, or um, someone hurt someone else, and you go out in anger. That's more of a justifiable anger for the latter one, but for physical hurt for yourself, I think depends on why you're getting into a fight in the first place. Emotional hurt could be what, like a breakup, losing a loved one or anything, right? You feel like it's not fair or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree. Like, I think it more so applies to emotional, at least in my life. Like, if there are things that recurringly cause pain for me, I might get angry at them, but then I'll also seek solution. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
I can get angry at like I was having sciatic issues last year. I was pissed. I was like, I'm too young for this. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm annoyed at this. Like, I'm angry at my pain. But the anger doesn't really help, right? Like, the anger
right.
doesn't help reduce the underlying issue. So you go talk to a doctor and get some prescription meds and do some yoga and whatever, and eventually the pain goes away, and so does the anger, like the fuel for the anger. With emotional pain, I think it's harder maybe to sometimes quell like the deeper things that are causing it, like the pain. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting for me because it's like I feel like it's with physical pain, it's really easy to kind of identify what's the source. Like, you
Right.
punched me, okay, you're the source of this pain.
Yeah.
But with emotional pain, it can be some insecurity that's getting jostled a little bit, or it could be right somebody breaks up with you, and that's clear, I guess. Um, but
I guess
it's internal, so you have to have some kind of, I guess, self awareness
I
to
guess
kind
the
of see
reason
what
I was kind
is
of
being.
pushing at that one is because, like, for me, that one doesn't quite compute 100%.
Mm,
Because I can't think of a time where I've been emotionally hurt that resulted in me getting, like, angry and lashing out about it. It more
mm,
so just resulted in me either being sad, upset, or depressed. Like, and I'm sure there are times that I'm just not able to recall off the top of my head that, I may have been in that situation where it made me angry, but I don't know. I can definitely relate to the physical pain. Like, nobody likes to get punched in the face.
Right.
But for me personally, I guess I never would have associated emotional pain with anger. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I was saying, like, that's not something I ever really computed in my head until just now.
right. I can relate more with the hurt and sadness part of like, um, I've been in a lot of relationships where, my partner would cheat on me or lie or manipulate, and it hurts, right? It hurts. And granted, if I didn't have good control of emotions, I could see myself lashing out, doing something crazy, doing something, not productive, not conducive to anything. So I can relate to the hurt and sadness, and then just feeling that injustice, right? Oh, I have been wronged, and I need to do something about it. And luckily, I didn't let anger or anything make me lash out at, and just handle it in the most professional way. So
Yeah, Strive chimed in and said being cheated on can definitely induce anger, and looking at it from that perspective, absolutely, yeah. That would definitely that wouldn't be physical pain, that'd be emotional pain, and that would be quite angering. And I have been in that situation before, so I guess I never put two and two together.
Glad to make that connection for you. Brought you some memory of your emotional pain.
you were so angry you blocked it out. You didn't even remember until now.
It's possible.
Okay, let's look into the long-term effects of anger. As we have spoken, we have touched on it. Like, anger can be used as a positive and useful emotion if expressed appropriately. Um, so let's look at what we think long-term effects negatively and positively are.
So, negatively, and can kind of use Phil's example with his mom, negative long term impact of lashing out in anger, people aren't going to want to be around you. People aren't going to want to talk to you. They're not going to want to be near you. They're not going to want to associate with you. Depending how you process your outward anger, I know in my teenage years, I knew a lot of people that when they got angry, they would physically hurt themselves.
Mm,
And that can have drastic long term effects depending
right.
on what you're doing to yourself. Like, I had one friend, like, he'd punch his basement wall, which was solid concrete,
Oh no,
and a time or two broke a knuckle or broke a finger.
Jesus.
Do it enough, you're going to lose functionality of your hand.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember I was at a party one time and it was not even my house. And I got so angry that I punched a hole in the house of this other person.
Oh
And it
no.
was like, well, now you got to take accountability for that. Like, you got to go to Home Depot and figure out how to patch a hole in the wall. And it's like, wow. Anger management reminds me of The Office. Like, I should have been sent to an anger management seminar or something.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think anger long term, I don't, yeah, people can physically hurt themselves. I haven't done a lot of that, but I just feel like long term, it just like, I think it's internal. Like for me, like I view it as like just ineffectual. Like I just never felt like I actually had a long term solution. Like that has been the long term effect of anger on me. Like it never really soothing that anger and not addressing root issues of it. I feel like made me feel like okay, actually circle back to me. I don't even know where I'm going with this.
I
Don't
can kind
I'm
worry.
of
deep
build
in my
off
mind
what
on
you were
this one.
saying there. And I think that's a problem for a lot of people nowadays is they don't have that long-term solution that you're mentioning. Because for a lot of people, there isn't one. So it's more so learning how to deal with it in the moment and express it in a positive and constructive way versus a negative lash out or anything along those lines.
Yeah. And the long term, and I think circling back to, because you're using fear, it's kind of like the only way you know how to handle your relationships, and I guess just anything really, is being angry and trying to force things to happen, right? It becomes your go-to coping mechanism in life.
Yeah, I think
Right.
you can become addicted to anger in a
Mm,
way, like using anger because it
mm,
feels good sometimes to feel angry. And when you're angry, you're oftentimes putting yourself up on a pedestal. Like,
mm,
there's an injustice here, and I'm the one who suffered. Like, and I
right.
feel like that can be like an emotional, like, I feel better than you,
Mm.
which makes it kind of like, yeah, like you said, a behavior that you can kind of cling to. And that's sometimes justified and sometimes not, as we talked about. Sometimes I think, people are just completely like their perception of the situation is wrong, but they can still make themselves out to be like like they can have a righteous anger even though they are not in the right.
Right.
And other times you're actually reacting to an unjust situation.
Yeah. Another effect I see is like I just believe it's just unproductive in general. Just usually if we're talking about full out anger, right? Yeah, uh two factions or two parties of people, getting angry at each other, I believe is just so unproductive. I don't think it's the most progressive way in like solving a problem. We see it a lot, right? Everyone has seen it a lot in like in just socially of like we're not gonna go into it, we're not gonna go deeply into it at all, but like politics or gender conversations, war, more a lot of injustices with the war going on right now, and the borders and stuff like that. So everyone on each side, the ones that are the loudest are usually the most angry, and then no one wants to just have a good conversation and just try to meet in the middle or try to figure out something where both can be not exactly happy, but it's like, okay, let's try this out and see if it works, right? Everyone's just angry and then nothing really happens.
Yeah, and that goes back to the how like majority of society today takes that my way or the highway approach.
Mm-hmm.
There's no attempt to find a common middle ground
Mm-hmm.
and build off that. It's just, nope, you're going to listen to me. I don't care what you have to say.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just feel I think that makes sense. And because anger in our society is all bark no bite, right? Like you
Mm.
can't really hurt other people. We have a system of laws and regulation,
Right.
rules in place where you can't actually follow through on anger in any way. So yeah,
Unless you're
Right. And it
it's
willing
makes
to
you
accept the consequences.
or yeah, you are ready to accept the consequences of that.
yeah.
Um,
Because it makes you look like a crazy person if you're just screaming out, yelling out. Like you could be right. That's the main thing. Is like you could be totally right, but if I'm screaming at you at the top of my lungs, you're like, then you're freaking crazy. Like, what is wrong with you, right? It's like, even if I'm saying good things, but I can't say it in a positive manner, you're not gonna want to listen to me. You're just like, dude, you're freaking crazy.
yeah, it doesn't. Anger doesn't find agreement. Like that's the thing is I've tried to use it as like for example just going back to my relationship with my mom, there's sometimes I literally actively thought if I get angry enough at this situation she won't bring this up again, like there's no way she will bring this up again. And
Hmm.
it does not work like that, like because it's not a compelling reason to like actually persuade someone to change their mind or
Hmm.
to to build a solution. So,
Right.
like you were saying, Ben. So there's so many times where I've gotten angry and I wish I hadn't gotten angry, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't really remember many times that I got angry and I was like, I'm glad I was angry in that situation. Even times like there was one, I don't know if you guys, this is something that comes to mind. It's kind of silly, but I don't know if you guys are ever like in crowds or like in a club and like you're dancing and like there's people bumping into you and you kind of get annoyed at them, and so you kind of like start to give them a little bit of a shoulder so they give you more space. I do that all the time where I was like
Yeah.
I just get annoyed that people are like getting in my space, so I like try to like create a zone around me of like, okay, like you're not getting in my zone.
Right.
Um, and it never works. It's like you continue to butt against these other people and like and it makes me so frustrated. But like there was one time like someone was actually obnoxiously dancing like right next to me and Tran. I like stopped them and I was like, hey, can you stop? Like you're hurting my wife. And then he was so angry. He actually circled back later, like 2 hours later that night, and he came back. He's like, like thinking he was gonna pick a fight, and he didn't because he was like, okay, well, you used your words, I guess. I mean, he didn't say any of that, but it was like
Right. Right.
I was so proud of how I handled that situation because
Right.
it was like, even in like a moment where I think it would have been easy to be like push this guy away. Like it was like, hey, dude, just stop, and like you can come at it with anger, and I'll be ready. Um, Anyway, that like I didn't get angry, and I'm proud of that. But I feel like in this situation, like a lot of people get angry, and then they get in a fight, maybe, or maybe they feel happy because they win the fight. But
Right.
I don't know.
See, but you
Yeah. It's
handled
a.
it properly, and looking back on it now, you're even proud of yourself that you made the step to not handle it in a negative way.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
from things we've explored in the past, like that is a great way to help people deal with anger is look at the positive times that you dealt with it in the correct way. Learn the strategies that worked for you because as we've said, there is no be all end all. There's not one thing that's going to work for every single person, but if you can look back at your little victories that you've had in the past and build off those, it helps you learn to cope with it down the road.
Hmm.
So those were negative. Positive long-term effects, or no, sorry. Yes, positive effects. If I, the only thing I can think of was if you use it as a motivation to push forward and do something, kind of like Jeff with that job with like if he just sat by and just let him be stepped over, right? That it's not good, but because he used his anger, it kind of pushed a message. So that's the only positive effect I can think of. But as long as you're able to manage it, not let it like go crazy or consume you, but otherwise, that's the only one positive
I
I
could
can
see
think of.
using it as a motivation and counting that as a long term positive outcome or
Hmm.
effect. Like, if you're upset with the situation you're in now and that makes you angry and you use that anger as motivation to get out and better yourself, like, I could see that.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see it that way. I've known guys who like have used that. They like channel their anger, especially in the gym, and it like helps their lifts and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And
Yeah, that's a good example.
but I don't know. It feels maybe I need to try it first before I knock it. I don't know. I don't know what to
Yeah.
say. It feels like it wouldn't be a sustaining, like you couldn't keep it up. But I know guys who like that is their strategy. They're like they think of the girl that cheated on them every time they go to like work out, and you know that works for them. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a great way to live. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be nicer to like go to the gym and have it be about you as opposed to someone else? I don't know. I just think that there's a joy that comes without living in anger,
And I
and there
can
is
see
some joy
that
that comes
side
living
too.
in anger too. But
Like, because you got to think, using your example there, if you have a friend that goes to the gym and uses his cheating ex as motivation to lift, what kind of long term mental effects is that having on him?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I can definitely see your
And
side of it.
it I don't know. Like it's like, oh, is the reason they cheated because you weren't bulking? Like I think it might also lead to some like body issues as well. But anyway, that's completely separate. I'm just saying.
But I mean, that.
I think it can be a powerful motivator. I don't know if I could think of it as like a positive long term motivator. Then again, I don't know. I feel like you hear of success stories like Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. I don't know if this is true, but I remember in the Social Network, like he was angry at some chick, and that's how he built Facebook. You know,
What? I okay. I
I
didn't know
mean,
that.
if it
he was
worked.
like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's the true story, but that's how the movie portrayed it. It was like
Yeah.
some girl like rejected him, and he like made this website to like basically bully her, cyberbully her, and
Hmm.
it ended up being the precursor for Facebook. But is Facebook even a positive thing on society? I mean, yeah, I guess that's a
I would
whole other
argue
That's a
no.
whole
conversation.
different conversation.
I would argue no.
I like that's actually a good point. I maybe we should do social media and stuff. That's a good. Just write that down. Okay. Um. Okay. Last section. Let's each go into our testimonies of anger. Phil's gone a lot into it. But Jeff and Phil, do you want to go into like how anger affects y'all, and how y'all deal with it, etc.?
So I'll go first just because, as we've discussed off camera, when it comes to anger, I am what's known as the anomaly.
Mm.
Because I don't think I ever truly learned how to deal with my anger. I just woke up one day and asked myself why I'm so mad.
Right.
And since then, I haven't had an issue with anger. But I do think we should take some time to talk about some different coping mechanisms or different ways to express your anger so that way it doesn't come out negatively. And some of the examples that I gave Vin earlier today is being like constructive with it. So I know a good amount of people when they start having those negative emotions, and this works for all of them, not just anger, they would go and paint and let
Mm.
the painting be the expression. Or even though it's slightly childish, I have friends that will go and build Legos just so they can see what they can create. Like, you have to find a positive way to express your anger so that way, A, you're not lashing out at people, and B, I would argue is just as important, not bottling
Hey man, I still play with Legos now, so I mean,
it.
I don't know why it's childish, unless you're saying I'm childish. But
The boot fits.
yeah. Okay.
I'm kidding.
Uh, Phil, your own testimony on anger, probably more
Yeah,
so when you were a kid, right?
yeah. I think not just. I mean, I this is something I still work with. I think I have come to realize that I am an angry person. That I was taught, my grandfathers were angry people and my
Mm.
uncles were angry people, and I modeled that behavior. I think when I look back at times I was really angry. I literally remember one time I shouted to my dad, "I'm gonna kill you." And I was like,
Oh,
that was crazy. Like,
that's crazy. How did he
and
handle that? What happened? How if I can go if I can
I
ask?
mean, I think it's kind of like you remember you were talking about like the person, like, even if what they're saying is right, like if they sound crazy, and I think I just sounded crazy. Like, I don't think he took it at face value or
I
anything. It's
gotcha.
just
I
like,
gotcha.
this is a child like
Mm,
throwing a tantrum. I think that's
yeah.
how my dad approached it, and that's a conversation I actually still need to have with him about like apologizing to him, because like that definitely crossed the line, I feel
Mm.
like, and it wasn't warranted. Like, I
It's
was an
not
adult.
warm.
He was telling me something I didn't want to hear. I could have left. I could have done my own thing. Like, you know, it wasn't like it didn't merit that kind of reaction. So just
Mm.
basically, I think anger. I've come to associate anger with a lot of the times I got too angry as times of that I regret, and things that, yeah, I think I just realized kind of what Jeff said. I don't think it was a sudden realization for me, like, oh, why am I so angry? I just think that over time I have learned that anger is not super productive, and that like the things that I'm seeking for, I just can't get through anger. Like, if I get angry at my dogs, I used to get angry at my dogs because they
Mm.
wouldn't like listen to me, and it's like, that just doesn't work. Like, you're speaking to someone who doesn't understand what you're saying.
Right, right.
Like it makes no sense, and you cannot control them because they are animals, and they're gonna do like, you can train them, but like you cannot fully, they are
They're not
beings, and
robots.
you can
Yeah.
never control this other individual. And so, yeah, there's a prayer I say, right? Like, it's called the Serenity Prayer, and it's about like praying to accept the things you cannot change, courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that wisdom, I'm starting to get a little bit of it,
Mm.
basically. In terms of like tactically, like in the moment when I'm getting angry, I found taking walks has probably been like the best way I can handle it. And I can
Mm.
literally just go on a walk and scream into a void. And sometimes I will literally do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, you might seem crazy to some like now I live in a neighborhood where I plan to live for a while, so maybe it's a little more sus. But back when I was like in an apartment, I didn't care
Oh my
who
god.
was hearing me.
Oh no,
I
that's
can't
crazy.
imagine walking outside and seeing one of my neighbors just strolling down the street. Ah!
Yeah, but I found walks are way better. Like when I gamed, I used to hit the table a lot. That hurt my hands, so I don't like physical. Like maybe boxing or something could be good, but
Hmm.
walks, 10 deep breaths. If you can manage to remember, many times I don't, but a lot of the times I can storm out, and that's a fine. My wife is okay with that kind of form of anger, I think, more than me hitting something in the house.
Right,
So
right, exactly.
it's about what works for you and works for the people you need to deal with at home.
What about you,
Yeah.
Vin?
I had a long history with anger back from like childhood up to teenage years. I I don't know. I was just unrestrained. Like every negative emotion I just exuded out, and especially anger. Um, I was bullied a lot up to like 14 years old, and I was fat. I was the weird kid. So I just it felt like an injustice. Like, why is everyone making fun of me? Like, it's unfair. And so I just get mad at everything, and I used anger as a fear tactic. Right? It's like, oh, my I go against my mom and my grandma and my sister because it's like, oh, I'm stronger than them, and so I don't need to listen. I don't need to like think for myself or anything. I just got angry and lashed out when it doesn't go my way. It got the worst part was probably when I was like 13 to 16, and I was living with my dad, and we just fought every single day to the point one day I punched a hole into the wall. I never did anything like that, and I was just so angry. And nobody really taught me how to like control my emotions, and it was kind of similar to Jeff around 16. It just kind of hit me something, and I think everything just kind of came all at once, and I'm just like, oh my god, like this is not who I want to be. And so I stopped being as angry. But then, throughout the years, taking psychology classes, getting a psychology degree, I took at least 2 years of I call it emotional training, and then 2 more years of brain training, of like in neurology, you can train your brain, you can morph it into however you want. And so I was like, okay, I was like, okay, at 18, I was like, this is who I want to be, and I don't want to be an angry person. So, one technique was every time you get frustrated or mad at something, you just tell yourself to not get mad at it. Even if it doesn't work in the moment, your brain's like, oh, I shouldn't be mad in these moments. So then it slowly, gradually starts to transform. And so I noticed it actually worked one day when moved into an apartment with a roommate for college, and we had like some kind of like billing problems. We had to go all the way out to downtown. It was like a 30-minute drive in the hot sun during the summer and or August in Texas, right? And I asked him, I was like, how are you feeling? You're really quiet. And he's like, oh, I'm just so frustrated. I'm so and then he wasn't angry, but he's like, I'm so frustrated. And I looked at him, I was like, huh. Because this is, 2 years post quote unquote training. And I was like, I don't feel frustrated. In my head, I'm like, there's a problem. Yes, you can get mad about it, but I'm just gonna go fix the problem. So for me, it was more of like, oh, I'm just gonna train my brain to not feel anger or frustrated. Um, yeah, and I think gaming, I don't get frustrated either because I play to hang out with my friends rather than a winning thing, like a competition. So I guess that's why I also don't feel anger when I lose, because that's not the point. So I think it's also like you people get angry at like depending on what the situation is, right? If you're going for it to win, then of course when you lose, it's frustrating. It's not good. Um, so yeah, so that's my history with anger. The last time I got angry was probably like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when my real dad he uh, he kind of took advantage of my sister, and I knew how my dad was, and my sister wouldn't listen, and so I didn't get angry at her. I got angry at my dad, right? It's like this injustice, like how dare he, how could he do this? And I like threw something against the wall. Everyone told me to kind of just leave, and I was like, yeah. Um, that was the last time. So I only get angry at things when I feel like it's really an injustice now, not like just lashing out randomly anymore.
So you
So
don't really get upset with like minor inconveniences anymore.
yeah. I made sure to um, really get that out by age 25. Fun fact, also neurology, 25 is kind of when you finish developing your brain. So, if you're 24 years old, you guys have a year. uh,
Crossed that bridge a little while ago, so
yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'll need to change
Um,
my approach. But do you have any like other tips for
yeah.
anger management?
So last thing we wrote down is long-term strategies for anger can include regular exercise. That's a talk we can have. I think it's okay if if you're angry at something and you go take it out at the gym, right? Because one, you're improving yourself, and two, you're not lashing it out onto someone else. So I'm okay with like every time I go to the gym. I'm taking it out on my body, right? Like making it improving my body rather than taking it out on someone else.
I would say that
Uh,
one's situational.
okay.
And the reason I say that, if you follow along with me here for a sec,
Yep.
if it's a problem that can be fixed,
Hmm.
I would say, like, yeah, sure, go to the gym to pump some stress out, but
Okay.
then still come back to resolve said problem.
Mm,
But if it's a problem that can't be fixed and it's something you just kind of have to learn to cope with, that would, to me, that's a more appropriate use of going to the gym. Is,
nice.
these are the things I can't deal with, so I'm going to get that stress and frustration out in a healthy way at the gym. If you understand what I mean by that.
Yes. Another one is relaxation techniques. So breathing is a good one. The one I commonly go to is 4 seconds in the nose, 4 seconds out the mouth, especially in like in the moment kind of deals. You're getting angry in the moment. Breathing, getting oxygen into your brain helps you calm down and makes you kind of think a little better. And meditation. Meditation has been proven to help a lot with anger and all the other negative emotions, really.
And I think
And
Phil mentioned yoga. That would go along with that.
mm, that's relaxing.
Yeah. I mainly use it for physical, but I guess mental too. The
Yeah,
funny, the
exactly.
breathing thing is funny. I have angry breathing now too. Like that is
Hmm.
now a form that I show my anger to Tran, which is not good. Like I've
Mm,
taken something that was supposed to be a technique to relax anger, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna show Tran that I'm angry now by breathing really heavily in and out. And I'm like, I need to work on that because that's like, it was a good technique for a while, and now I don't think it's a good technique anymore because
yeah,
now I use it as like a signal, like a weird, yeah, subconscious signal. Um, I think we should talk about therapy. I mean, I think therapy is important. I've been going to therapy for 4 years,
yep,
and I think it just helps with like the insecurities that we talked about, with the fate, the pain, the fear.
Therapy is a great one, especially since, like, nowadays the negative stigma of therapy is starting to fade. It's not viewed as it was, 15, 20 years ago. Like 15, 20 years ago, if you openly admitted you went to therapy, people were like, "What, are you crazy? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I shouldn't associate with you." But nowadays, like, it's much more accepted, and I think therapy is a great resource for people to use.
yeah. And along with therapy is venting, right? I saw in the chat, uh, Nova had said screaming is a stress relief. So venting out just your lungs, venting out the story, the problem, the source of what you're going through, just really helps you really think clearly, right? It's like, okay, vent everything out and just, okay, I talked it out. Now let me think about, I'm able to think more about like what's going on. So,
Absolutely, get with a person you trust or you're close with. And my wife and I actually use this semi-frequently when we come across something. Like, if she comes to me with an issue, like, obviously an issue that doesn't apply to me, we have this thing where we'll be like, all right, do you want solutions or do you want comfort?
Yeah.
And if they choose comfort, it's just a venting session. They can get out what they need to get out, and you are there to listen and respond if needed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anything else, guys?
No?
Do you ever like play along with anger when your partner's angry? Like, I feel like I do that, and it's kind of fun, and it can be a nice diffusing technique too. It's like
What do
they're
you
angry
mean?
about stuff. I don't know. I guess it could be very double edged, and maybe it's not a good idea. But like, if they're angry, like, I'll be like, yeah, that was so ridiculous. Like, that person sucks. You know what I mean? But like, I'm kind of saying it facetiously, so it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a not try this at home. I could see it like making, they're like
Grammar
redirecting the
appears.
anger from the other person to you. Like,
Right.
but sometimes it works, and it's like, oh, they're like, you can laugh. You can take that moment to laugh at. Like, okay, this is funny.
I mean,
Never mind.
using comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're a funny person, so like that makes more sense. Whereas like if I try to do that, they just take me seriously. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. With my relationship, I usually have like if she's angry, my girlfriend's angry, I have to be the calm one and just kind of talk her down and just talk it out and make sure she understands, or like I need to apologize or anything. Um, so never went along with the anger because I don't think that would have been productive for my relationship.
Yeah.
What works for one does not work for others.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that concludes our first emotions chapter is anger. Thank you all for joining us today. Next week will be sadness for chapter 2. Jeff, you want to start the motto?
Sure. Don't forget, y'all, we do have our Discord server. It is the Brothers Bonfire. If you are wanting a community, a band of brothers that are going through similar experiences as you, or just some people to talk to, then come join us on our journey and take a seat at the bonfire. We do have a Discord join link for those of you that are here on Twitch. If you scroll down, it'll be below me. And Vin, I do believe you posted one with the podcast itself as well.
Yep. Cool. And along with uploading every Wednesday, we are streaming the podcast every Sunday at 7 p.m. So come hang with us after the podcast. The stream is a safe space for anyone to just chill, hang, and chat about anything. All are welcome. Take care, guys. And thank you, Phil, for being our first guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Alrighty.
Bye, everybody.
That concludes. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Nice. I'm going to stop recording. Oh, bye-bye, Phil. Stop.
He took off.
Yep.
Let the outro play for like 15, 20 seconds and then hit end stream.
Yes, sir. Duration reveal. Again, multi-track.